everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Program information session and Q&A with New Hampshire state legislators. I'm Nikki Kolb, NOFA New Hampshire's operations manager. NOFA New Hampshire is the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Hampshire, and we're a statewide nonprofit dedicated to helping people build local, sustainable, healthy food systems by actively promoting organic, regenerative, ecologically sound farming, gardening, and land care practices. As one of many partners in the New Hampshire Farm to School Network, we're excited about how the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Bill will provide New Hampshire students with access to fresher, nutrient-dense local foods while increasing food security and resilience in our state and region. By incentivizing New Hampshire school districts to purchase 10% of their nutrition budgets on locally grown and produced food for breakfast and lunch services, the reimbursement program will improve school nutrition, channel 1.8 million federal and state dollars into New Hampshire's farm and food economy, and inform children about local food. So many stakeholders will be positively impacted by this bipartisan bill: children and families, farmers, producers and fishers, educators, food service staff, school districts, communities, and our environment. Today, we'll learn more about how this exciting program to support New Hampshire students in our state's food system, how similar programs are working in our neighboring states, and how you can help ensure this vital bill becomes a law. Joining us this afternoon, we have Representative Alexis Simpson, the primary bill sponsor, and bill sponsor Representative Megan Murray, Doris Demers, School Food Service Director at Oyster River School District, Stephanie Shu, Manager at Farm to Institution, New York State, and Renee Page, Executive Director of Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, home to the Maine Farm to School Network. Welcome and thank you for being here. We're going to hear from each speaker before moving into the Q&A, so please type your questions into the chat along the way and we will answer them as we can as they come along and raise them later if we don't address them at the moment. And please also note that this session is being recorded and there's also closed captioning available, and I'll type more information about how to access that into the chat if anyone needs help. So I would like to now turn it over to Representative Simpson and Representative Murray to tell us more about the New Hampshire bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm glad to be here today with everybody. I'm Alexis Simpson. As Nikki said, I'm a state representative from Exeter, representing the towns of Exeter, Newfields, Newmarket, and Stratham. I'm also excited to hear later from folks in other Northeastern states who have reimbursement policies already in place so that we can hear how it's working successfully elsewhere. The Farm to School Reimbursement Policy Bill, which is HB 1657, also called the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Bill, will allow for increased participation by farmers, producers, fishers, and schools across the state. The bill has had a hearing in the Education Committee. We are waiting for a vote there, and then we'll move on to the next phase. Please continue to talk about this bill with your colleagues, your neighbors, with folks at your school and parents, and look out for email updates about how you can be involved in making sure this bill goes all the way to the governor's desk. This bill represents many hours of dedicated time and energy from stakeholders across the state, those in the agriculture and food sectors, those in the school nutrition programs, and those community members who represent the social infrastructure that makes the local food economy thrive. Many of you are here today. Thank you for all the work you have done and the work you will do to make this program development possible. The investment we're asking the state legislature to make will make it possible for more schools across the state and more communities all over the state to take advantage of the benefits of local food for local schools. The program will nourish more children, support more local farmers and producers, and strengthen the supply chain resiliency across New Hampshire. With this policy, we can improve the health and well-being of our children and the resiliency of our local food system. We can build up infrastructure that will make these benefits last long into the future. The Department of Education's Office of Nutrition Programs and Services would provide a monetary incentive to schools who choose to direct more of their per meal cash reimbursement funds from the USDA toward purchases from New Hampshire and New England farmers. The state would encourage this channeling of federal funds into the local economy by awarding each school $1 for every $3 spent on food from New Hampshire and $1 for every $6 spent on food from the New England region, all up to a $1,200 maximum reimbursement for each school in New Hampshire. The goal is for all of our local schools to be purchasing altogether at least 10% of our food in schools from local farms, fishers, producers all over the state and the region. By offering every school a reimbursement of up to $1,200, we would be investing in our children's health. By redirecting $1.2 million federal dollars into our local economy, we ensure that we strengthen our local economy, that we build food systems infrastructure that will make us resilient into the future. Our children's health and the health of our farms and rural communities and our fisher people are worth the $600,000 investment from the state. A robust farm to school program will help strengthen New Hampshire's agriculture sector and regional food security. It will also help New Hampshire students understand the regional, agricultural, geographic, social, and cultural aspects of our food system in New Hampshire. Thanks again for your support of this bill and for being here today. I'm looking forward to taking your questions later on as well. Now I'd like to hand it over to Representative Megan Murray to talk more about the educational and curricular possibilities the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Policy Bill will provide.
Thank you, Representative Simpson. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk about what is possible. When we talk about this bill, nothing in the bill is directing the department to adopt any educational curriculum, but we really see this as a jumping off point for learning opportunities in school communities to talk about things from agriculture, aquaculture, composting, all sorts of learning opportunities that may be interconnected to this policy matter. And we really see it as a way to share that knowledge with learners across the state. I think it's super exciting that this would be a potential opportunity for learning communities to then say that they had learned that the food source that they were eating on their lunch tray that day came from 4 to 6 miles away. Talking about regionality, food supply resiliency, economics. There's a multitude of issues that would potentially be a jumping off point for educators and students and families in the community to connect them to their local food sources, their food producers. And we are extremely excited that these possibilities would be born out of this policy. So again, we are excited to continue this conversation. Please stay connected to us as legislators and ask questions, share with your community, talk to your your PTO, PTAs, all of those types of things. We're really excited to sort of see this grow and see food resiliency strengthen here in New Hampshire. So with that, I will pass it off. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Representative Simpson and Representative Murray. Your insights and explanations about the bill were so helpful. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Doris Demers, School Food Service Director at Oyster River School District. Thank you so much, Doris.
Hi, everyone. I've been here, this is my 10th year in Oyster River Schools. But before that, I was 19 years in Maine schools. I am a farm girl at heart, so this is important to me. Who doesn't love those fresh tomatoes? You can't eat them the rest of the year. So I started when my kids were in schools and in soccer games, and I used to stop at and get fresh apples at a local orchard on my way, and really worked hard to get those into our school. And I'm still buying apples from the same person. But when I became a director, I got more involved in this because this is very important to me. I just was not happy with the products that we were getting that were coming from across the country. And I joined the Farm to School work group, in the state of Maine, and was actually working with that group when we passed this type of a bill in Maine. It was very, very easy for us as a director to get our reimbursement. It was quick. It wasn't a lot of work at all. It actually was almost no work. I made, as a president of the Maine School Nutrition Association, I made Farm to School my focus. And we had a Farm to School meet and greet and just got people more involved and more interested in doing that. When I came here, it was sort of starting over, but the great thing is that my district actually had just passed a bill that they would give the food service program $14,000 for local foods, and that is unheard of. I've never heard of anything else. I actually asked them to repeat it because I was really shocked, and they said, would you work with that? Well, heck yeah, I would love that. So that's $14,000 worth of food that didn't have to come out of my budget. I think there's a lot of misconceptions from farmers of what they can and can't sell to schools. I know in Maine, I remember them telling me that they couldn't sell me apples because they didn't have the little stickers to put on them. And we don't want those stickers. We have to take a lot of time to take them off. Other things like, we can't get through the barriers, and nobody had ever called me. But moving forward, we buy a lot of local here in this district. I'm really pleased with what we've been able to do, although the pandemic has set us back a bit. We're getting back into it. We're back to buying local milk for both my high school and my middle school. We do bulk 5-gallon bags, and the kids, we have a machine where they can just pour their own, a dispenser. And we're trying to figure out how we can do it at elementary school as well. All our beef is local beef, some of it grown right here in Durham. And, lots of other things. Still looking for more connections. I plan to have another farm to school meet and greet, which is how I started out back in Maine. And then again, when I got here, and hopefully get more farmers in to talk to me and find out what else we can purchase from them, because they just are so busy. They don't have time to start calling every school to find out if they're going to purchase. So, we need more relationships with farmers. I'm thrilled about this bill. I hope it goes through, and I hope it will be funded, because having it pass and funding it are two separate issues, as we knew in Maine. But we're all trying to save money, and $1,200 more in money for local foods is that much less that will have to come out of my budget. I will pass it to the next person.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Doris. That was so helpful. And so next up, we're going to hear from Stephanie Shu, who is the manager at Farm to Institution, New York State, to let us know about how a similar bill is working in New York. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you see my PowerPoint? Great, okay. Well, thank you everyone. My name is Stephanie Shu. I'm with American Farmland Trust. I want to thank Nikki, Stacy, Alexis, and Colleen for putting this excellent panel together. I'm really excited about your upcoming initiative. And as you'll see from our program in New York, it's done wonders to increase local purchases in our state. I'm going to give you a quick 10-minute overview of the New York Farm to School Purchasing Incentive that we piloted in our state a couple of years ago. We're going to talk a little bit about what the 30% incentive is, impacts of the program, challenges, successes, and recommendations and next steps for our state. So Farm to Institution New York State, or FINESS, is a collaborative initiative led by American Farmland Trust to dramatically expand the volume of food grown on New York farms that's served in institutions across New York. So in 2018, the state of New York created the nation-leading New York Farm to School Purchasing Incentive. So this incentive is the most generous in the country to build farm to school purchasing by quadrupling the state's per lunch meal reimbursement from 6 cents to 25 cents for schools that spend at least 30% of total food costs for lunch on food from farmers, from growers, producers, and processors in New York State. The state also doubled funding for the Farm to School Grants Program to a record $1.5 million to help schools get on the pathway to reaching that 30%. So this provided unprecedented support and opportunity for the growth of farm to school in our state, which we're very grateful for. So we're now heading into the third year of this initiative with 2 years of the 30% incentive under our belts. All right, so one of the main questions we get are what products are eligible to meet the 30% criteria? So any New York State food product purchased and used in the reimbursable meal for the school lunch program, that's the answer. So a New York food product, what is that? It's defined as a food item that's grown, harvested, or produced in New York State, or a food item processed inside or outside New York State comprising of over 51% agricultural raw materials grown, harvested, or produced in New York State by weight or volume. So for instance, like meat or packaged food products like grape juice and apple slices. So the initiative is currently housed in our New York Department of Education. State Ed reviews all of our applications, they conduct audits, and they distribute the reimbursement awards for the program. So participating SFAs, they need to submit an application by August 15th. They need to put in a New York State food item or a dollar value list. They need to document their purchases, including product formulation statements for processed products if they use them, and then also an attestation, I can't say it today, it's a Friday, attestation statement. So schools are then going to be audited by State Ed. Eligibility is based on purchases from the previous school year. So if schools qualify, they're going to be receiving reimbursement for each lunch meal in the current school year. So for year one, we had 49 SFAs apply for the program. And in the first year, this is kind of dismal, but only 7 schools successfully qualified for the reimbursement. And there are a variety of factors for this. One of the main ones being that we had a mid-year rollout in January, and we had limited opportunity for education assistance for the producers and for the schools themselves. While many of schools saw the 30% as a challenge, those who actually successfully achieved this in year one, they spent almost over $3 million on New York grown food while feeding over 35,000 students. Encouragingly, this also included Buffalo Public Schools, which is the second largest school district in the state, aside from New York City. So in year two, this was a better year, 57 SFAs applied for the program, and all of them were accepted. So after a rocky first year start, year two saw the emergence of we had increased technical assistance, we had vendor participation, and we had a lot more enthusiasm from the schools. And ultimately, $5 million was spent across the state on local foods, and over 90,000 students were served New York State foods daily. So in a report, we've got a number of reports, which I have at the end, the links at the end of this presentation, but we have a report called Growing Resilience. We surveyed SFAs in year two, and we saw significant growth from year one to year two. Schools, like I said, they understood the guidelines better, and they were ready to provide that documentation to support that they were growing, or they were purchasing local. Almost 70% of schools surveyed said that they're feeling motivated to increase spending as a result of this program, and 44% of schools stated they would be applying in the future and were working towards this goal. So what we found in our studies is that with the right support, 75% of schools expect to reach 30% by 2025. And we actually did this survey too. We conducted all this reporting during COVID. So this is even in the report talks about factors of that as well. But even with that, 75% of schools said they plan to reach it. So this is going to increase the amount spent on New York food to about $250 million and increase access to local food for at least 900,000 students across the state. So it's big. The New York Farm to School Purchasing Incentive, it has the potential to generate over $360 million in total economic impact statewide, with a return on investment of $3.50 for every taxpayer dollar spent. So what are the results? What are schools buying? So schools reported increased student participation and enthusiasm for school lunch, which is exciting. They're also purchasing more New York grown and raised fruit, fluid milk, vegetables, dairy products, and protein when compared to previous years prior to the initiative. There were a higher increase in vegetable purchases in year two than in year one. We also saw the purchase of more New York processed products as more products became available on the market. So of course, not without challenges, right? So in our year one and year two reports, we surveyed SFAs for the top barriers that they had for purchasing local food in general. So cost was usually cited, it was continually cited as the highest barrier to schools purchasing these ingredients. That being said, so when we asked folks to rate their barriers in context of participating in the 30% initiative, cost fell to number 9, which is actually a really good indicator that the incentive is working. So these findings, they further advocate the need for like cost reduction strategies like the purchasing incentive to really support schools in their local procurement efforts. So a number of different challenges that have come up for food service directors. Number 1 and number 2, they have a lack of time to collect all that documentation that New York's asking for. Also, you know, given that COVID is there, I know there were staff shortages, there continue to be staff shortages. And so a lot of food service staff relied heavily on food with minimal prep needed. So they didn't have time to prep the food. Let's see, number 3, current vendors were selling little to no New York food. Number 4, local food suppliers we're not least cost bidders, which is obviously required for a lot of school purchases to be the least cost bidders. So we're trying to figure out how to get around this procurement regulation. Number 5, schools don't even know where to start. And so that requires technical assistance for food service directors and for schools. Numbers, let's see, we talked about budget limitations. Number 7, New York producers don't bid at all. And so we need to actually work on training for producers as well and kind of boosting up the supply chain. Let's see what else. Number 8, we talked about not having enough shelf-stable local products in the winter. Cost of New York grown food can be high, as I mentioned before. And then number 10, vendors can't affirm sourcing to state ed standards to make sure that the products are actually from New York State. So those are some of the challenges, but you know, we're going in the right direction. We've got strategies for success. We asked school food directors the question, to increase your ability to purchase New York food and access this initiative, what would that support look like? And so the majority of schools, they were looking for additional New York products offered by their main vendor, rather than having to take the time to establish all these multiple little contracts with farms or smaller vendors. Schools, they also needed a list of producers and products available, as well as more minimally processed low prep New York products, such as like bagged carrots. There was a suggestion to either lower the 30% threshold as a possibility so that more people could achieve that, or potentially combine breakfast and lunch costs into that 30%, which we're working on now. And finally, schools would be more successful with New York's program if they had a dedicated staff member or somebody else to help them with identifying products and matchmaking with farms and helping them track their purchases or systematizing their documentation. So going forward, we're working on the following recommendations to ensure that our incentive, our 30% incentive, not only stays afloat, but we want it to really thrive. What we're asking for is codifying and continuing support for farm to school efforts in our state, including this incentive and our grants program. We want to invest in regional coordinators. New York is big, you know, we're wide. So we're trying to figure out how to increase capacity across the state. We want to increase training and support for food service directors and procurement staff. And additionally, we want to raise that small purchase threshold to the federal level of $250,000 to help those districts to purchase local foods with greater ease. As Nikki mentioned, this would strengthen, all this incentive, it's going to strengthen supply chains. We want to invest in capital projects such as processing facilities to make sure that schools are able to access these foods. We also need a way to easily prove that New York products are coming from where they say they're coming from, right? So maintaining the integrity of the program we're doing spot checks and we're looking for vendor audits in the future. And finally, we need to kind of strike this balance between collecting proper documentation and not making this process so cumbersome that the cost of applying to it outweighs the financial benefits schools receive. So overall, even with its kinks in the first few years, we know the program works. So simply put, the program provides a statewide framework that schools, provides schools with a pathway to buy more local products from New York farmers. Schools are serving more fresh foods to students. They're supporting child nutrition in the state and ensuring that students have access to healthy foods throughout the day. It's Farm to School is also driving investment in local supply chains and markets, including processed products. Like we have new cheese sticks going out. We've got a whole grape juice company started. We've got yogurt. So we're optimistic that with continued enthusiasm from schools and support from our state, New York, we're going to be able to maintain the program's success and ensure its sustainability. So hopefully it's in results to increase access to healthy local foods for kids and ultimately economic support for our state's farmers. And then we've got a number of resources here. We've got our reports that I referred to. If you want to check them out, I'm sure I'll send my slides out, and I guess someone will send them out to you. Cornell actually just released a really wonderful detailed report surveying our districts who were successful, and they focus on procurement trends and different pathways towards the 30%. We've got our state ed and ag and markets websites. And finally, we've got an Airtable with all updated eligible products approved for the 30% if you want to take a look and see if there's something that your state could use as well. And with that, stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was really helpful and interesting. And thank you for showing all your great slides and all that data. Thank you. And so now we're going to hear from Renee Page, who is the Executive Director of Healthy Communities of the Capital Area, and again, home to the Maine Farm to School Network. Thank you, Renee, whenever you're ready.
I assume you can see my slides.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Hi, everyone. As stated, my name is Renee Page, Executive Director at Healthy Communities of the Capital Area. We're a public health nonprofit based in Central Maine, and we are home to the Maine Farm to School Network. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about what we've done around local food incentives and to learn more about your bill too, which is really exciting. So to just start this off, a little bit of history about our local produce fund in Maine, which is what we called it. It was actually established in 2001. So, more than 20 years ago. And for any of you who know, our state motto is "Dear Ago, I Lead." So I feel like, we've really kind of led the charge in this area. 2001 was even long before farm to school was a thing, if you will. So this was very innovative at the time. And really the idea was to create a mechanism for reimbursement for farm direct purchases. And the intent was to support small growers. So really at the time, I think it was created to more or less to create institutional markets for small farms. And what I've included on the right here is a snapshot of the actual statute. And when it was originally set up, the schools would get $1 for every $3 spent on local purchases, and they had to be farm direct. And they had to be very whole produce, minimally processed. So it was limiting in that way. And the reason why I have the word established in quotes here is because I think Doris referred to it in that the fund was created in 2001, but it wasn't funded in 2001. So the way it operated for many years was on a first come, first served basis. Schools who submitted for reimbursement were reimbursed first, and when the money ran out, it ran out. And the way it was funded was largely by, DOE, Department of Education. If they happened to have any excess funds in their budget, like say they had a grant with a few dollars that were unspent, or they hosted a conference and they generated some revenue, they would, kick some money into the fund, and, they would make an announcement, there's 10 grand in the local produce fund, please submit for reimbursement. So that's the way it operated for many years. Then in 2019, we submitted a bill to fund the fund. So, the way I thought about it over all these years was like, DOE kind of set up this savings account at the bank with good intentions, but really weren't putting any money into their savings account. So 2019 provided us the opportunity to actually put some money in the savings account, which was successful. So this bill did two things. It had the fiscal note to fund a full-time staff position embedded at the Department of Education to oversee the fund and administer it, as well as provide trainings for school food service to address some of the challenges that Stephanie just mentioned around, handling fresh produce and sourcing from local farms. How do I do that? So those trainings, that was part of the expectation of this role. And to also manage our Maine Harvest of the Month program, which is a marketing and promotion program for Maine products, and many states have a Harvest of the Month program. I know New Hampshire does as well. So it was really woven into that as, to kind of promote, this is our featured product this month, say it's blueberries, and really linking Harvest of the Month to the procurement piece. So how can we help you schools source blueberries for the Maine Harvest of the Month program? And I think it also, helps support those nutrition education and experiential learning things that are happening in schools as well. So it's really linking the cafeteria to what's happening in the classroom. And then the other part of the fiscal note is, funding the fund. So there was about 97,000 that went to fund the position, and then 430,000 to fund the fund for the reimbursements and the trainings. Then that wasn't good enough. So in 2021, we introduced a bill to change the local produce fund, which really limited purchases to whole produce, to allow for more products to be included in what could be reimbursed with the fund. So the expansion changed the name of the fund from the local produce fund to the local food fund, and added the ability to buy value-added dairy. So still at this point, we don't include fluid milk as an option to be reimbursable. And it also now includes protein. And then the other piece it did was allow purchases from food processors and broadline distributors who operate in the state of Maine. So it didn't have to be farm direct. It also increases the cap from $1,000 a year per SAU to $5,000. So schools could buy up to $15,000 worth of local product now, and be reimbursed $1 for every 3 spent. I will say we did ask for $7,500 initially and as the cap, but this is, as it worked its way through the legislature, this is where we landed. And schools also get an additional $500 in reimbursement if an employee from their school attends one of the local foods trainings that are offered. And lastly, the original bill did have the provision that the fund could accept private and public funds to fund it, but in this new iteration, it really emphasizes that DOE can accept funds from private sources and encourages them to seek additional funds from federal sources to allow to reimburse even more than $5,000, as long as the funds don't come from the state. So I was asked to talk a little bit about our process. So Stephanie and anyone else who's here from New York might not want to hear this. And Doris kind of alluded to our very simple process in Maine. So on the left, you'll see our procedures for submitting a claim, which is really just fill out this form on the right and submit it with your monthly claim. And along with this form, so basically, the nutrition director just lists what the person or the source where they bought the food, the amount, and then at the bottom calculates 1/3 of that, and that's their request for that month. And then they also have to submit receipts. So how's it going after all these years? One thing, I have unintended consequences here on the left. One concern that we were brought up during the most recent legislative process when they were considering opening this up to broadline distributors and processors for sourcing was, how will this impact the small farmer that the original intent of this bill was to support? So will schools just stop supporting the smaller farms and just go with their broadline distributor because it's just easier, one-stop shopping? The other concern that's been brought up more recently as we work more regionally, and we've really experienced a lot of supply chain issues, of course, during COVID. I think those issues have always been there, but they've just been really highlighted during COVID, is those schools who operate on our borders. And I think maybe New Hampshire, you're the Dirigo state now, because I think it's very forward thinking that you put into your bill a provision for regional purchasing, and Maine will be watching you closely to see if you get that passed and how you implement that, because that is a challenge. Because, especially in New England, I think, somebody I think told me that Vermont, of all the counties in Vermont, all but 2 are on a border of the state. And New Hampshire's kind of this, these long skinny states with a lot of borders. How are we affecting the small farms that schools might be buying from right across the border? Will they stop buying from those farms because now they have to, in order to utilize these funds, it has to be Maine grown? So that's something that we're watching as well. And still, schools with limited capacity to forge those relationships, will we still continue to be kind of on this, the schools that have the most capacity to be sourcing locally are going to be the ones who benefit from this the most. So what we've learned so far over on the right with participation is, so this is like since we've converted to this most recent iteration, the Local Food Fund. Last year during the pandemic, we saw only 44 districts in the state requested almost $28,000 in reimbursement. And if you remember, we have like $400,000 available for reimbursement. So not highly utilized. However, and there's a lot of factors, the pandemic, all of that. But in this school year alone, so far, there have already been 60 districts who've requested almost $68,000, and they have sourced from 71 farms and 3 distributors. And some of those farms are definitely new farms that schools weren't sourcing from before. And I was also asked to talk a little bit about what's our audit process. And very different from New York. DOE just verifies that the submissions on that very simple form and receipts are from Maine producers or distributors. And that's about the extent of it at this point. Yeah, so I will leave it at that. Here's my contact information, of course, and just really excited to see what you are proposing in New Hampshire, and happy to make myself available to answer any deeper dive questions around how we've been so successful in Maine. And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to our statute if anybody's interested.
Great. Thank you so much, Renee. When you get a chance, if you don't mind stopping sharing your screen. Perfect.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries. Thank you for sharing all that helpful information and those many important considerations also. And we appreciate your support of our bill in New Hampshire, of course. And yeah, thank you to all of our speakers. And now we're ready to go into some Q&A. So if anyone has questions, if you could please type them into the chat, that would be excellent. But I would like to kick it off with a question, if that works for everyone. So I know that my question is for Representative Simpson and Representative Murray. I know you touched on this a little bit already, but I wondered if either of you or both of you could share just a little bit more information about what's next in the legislative process for the Local Food for Local Schools Reimbursement Bill in New Hampshire.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Nikki. So the hearing went in front of what happened in front of the Education Committee. And now we'll wait for the Education Committee to take it up in an executive session where they will vote to recommend it to the larger legislature, either ought to pass or inexpedient to legislate. I suppose they could also ask for, no, they can't really ask for a subcommittee because it has a fiscal note. So it needs to go to a second committee, which means that the larger legislature has to vote on it pretty soon so that there's time to recommend it to go to a second committee. I don't know exactly when the Education Committee will exec that bill. I would guess that we would vote on it as a large legislature, whether it comes out with an ought to pass or an inexpedient to legislate. We will vote on it as a larger legislature. Once it gets voted by the full House, then if it gets voted up, it will go on to the Finance Committee. I think I said Fiscal Committee. I meant Finance Committee. It will go to the Finance Committee after that. And then we'll have to make a case for it in front of the Finance Committee from a financial point of view. And then if it gets voted by the Finance Committee, yes, then it goes back to the legislature to vote again to go to the Senate. And then it will go into the Senate after crossover in March, and then they would take it up.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's really helpful. And I'm going to ask a question from the chat in just a second, but I'm going to share that we have a number of ways that everyone can continue to help advocate for the bill. So one question we have here from Catherine is, should we be contacting the House Education Committee now and continually?
My feeling is if you have, oh, Megan, sorry, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, that's okay, Representative. Go ahead.
My feeling is, especially if you haven't contacted them in depth yet, to let them know, to write them an email and let them know why you support this specifically about your own story and why it's important to you, you should definitely keep contacting them.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for Colleen for putting information about how to get in touch into the chat. We do have some other really helpful resources as well. We have an individual and organization sign-on letter that folks can continue to sign on to, and we can continue to share signatures to the House Education Committee. And we also have a really helpful toolkit with more information like how the bill is going to work, information we shared today at this webinar that you can use to help highlight any letter that you would like to draft up with some of those bits of information. And we have some social media images as well that people can use to help share that you support the bill on social media channels. And Colleen has shared that in the chat as well, and I'll pop it in again as well too. But does anyone, yeah, go ahead.
Nikki, can I add something? I don't know if Representative Murray was going to say something as well. I'd like her to, but anyone can also reach out to their legislators, even if they're not on the Education Committee, and ask them to talk to their colleagues on the Education Committee. So sometimes it helps if your legislator talks to somebody who they know on the Education Committee and says, look, this is really important. Can you pass this? Representative Murray?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the other pieces of information that is for folks who are maybe just getting engaged for the first time, if and when this would go to the Senate, the sort of the contact would start all over again with those senators, just like it would on the House side. So it's really important if you have an interest in this, you want to see it go further, stay connected and make sure that you're sort of following how a bill becomes a law. As you know, silly as that sounds, it really is helpful to continue to stay engaged in that way as it travels through the House, potentially the Senate, and then potentially to the governor's desk. So super excited to have the interest that we have out there. It seems to be growing daily, I think we heard in House Education that they were hearing from a lot of folks. And so it's exciting. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it's really helpful to share the additional tip of reaching out to your local representative. Okay, we have another question here. Thank you. Catherine asks, is there any reporting on this bill by MDEP New Hampshire Bulletin, or any other media that's shareable? We have been working on some media events. So we have a few pieces of press that have come out, and we'll make sure that we share those as well. But we're definitely working on continuing to share what's happening with the media. And we have two in-person events that are coming up next Friday, and one is in Littleton and another one is in Nashua. So people can go to those in person as well, and hopefully we'll have press there to talk about the wonderful farm to school work that's happening in New Hampshire and how this bill will continue to enhance that work. And some pieces are getting put into the chat right now. Thank you. Renee has a question. Is there anything in particular you're experiencing as hurdles that we states that have been successful with this can provide supporting information about? That's great. Thank you.
And just to clarify that we haven't provided already today, like, is there anything we missed the mark on, I guess is my point.
Can I respond for a minute? Everything you provided was really helpful. Thank you. Both of you, Stephanie and Renee, I was taking notes. So thank you very much for providing all that information. I did have one question coming out of your presentation from Maine. The program is housed under the Department of Education, right? But you mentioned like a Harvest of the Month program. Is that something that the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Education work together on? Or is it really kind of, I know this word has negative connotations, but is it really siloed in the Department of Education, or is there some work together between the two departments?
That's a great question. It was actually the Farm to School Network that launched it. And once we got it off the ground, it just made sense to house it at DOE, and they were willing to do that. There's not a whole lot of collaboration with the Department of Agriculture on that initiative in particular, interestingly. But you asking that question makes me want, note to self, like we need to make that connection better. But there is a lot of work by the Maine Farm to School Network and a few other partners who help promote Harvest of the Month throughout the year, whether it's, SNAP Ed or, other organizations that are interested in promoting healthy eating. So, but it is primarily housed at DOE. They share the resources and do the promotion and very much link it to our local food fund and just say, this month is, root vegetables. Don't forget, that you have funding available to help support those purchases.
Thank you. I have a question for New York too, but I don't want to monopolize the questions.
It would be great, Representative Simpson. And if others have questions, please continue to put them in the chat.
Stephanie, I was wondering if you all talked at all about the border problem. It did come up in the education committee, some questions about, we have a lot of school districts that are right on the border and buy from Vermont farms and New Hampshire. Anyway, wondered if you all have any ideas for us.
I love how you call it the border problem, because yes, it has definitely come up. And especially, I didn't really include in the presentation because there's so much to say about this program, and it could not in 10 minutes. But one of the issues that we did have is so our program includes milk. And so I know that's contentious in so many ways, but in some districts, and again, New York is large. And so in some districts, they can achieve that 30% just by milk. in other districts in other areas, like in, for instance, Long Island and Hudson Valley, which is, close to, they get their milk from New Jersey and from Pennsylvania. And so without that milk, they were not able to achieve the 30%. And so, yes. And so that's one of the questions that have come up. It's like, well, I mean, if you look geographically, I mean, if you're right, like I'm in the Hudson Valley right now, and we're fairly close to Pennsylvania. And so, I mean, that's the actual miles that you have there. It's, what is defined as local. And so that was a big conversation that was had when this whole thing was formed, because it's, because it's in the state, because it's state funded, they decided to just make it clear cut and say, okay, we're going to define local by saying state. But that is something that, what is the integrity of having local foods and having this program, when, is it really helping all the farms, and specifically around that geographic location? I mean, like, is it really, that was something that came up. So we've decided to solve that issue by just saying it's for New York State, and that's what we're going to define as local. But yes, that definitely is something that was, it went around and around for a while.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
I mean, I feel like, sorry to just jump in here, but I feel like Stephanie is bringing up other issues like, travel miles, one of the, core, pillars, I guess, of farm to school and local food is, it's not just about buying within your state, but, what, labor practices, climate, it's not just about Maine grown. It's like, does it make more sense to buy something from the county, well, Aroostook County, what we call the county in Maine, which is, up near Canada, or, just over the border in Portsmouth? Is it better to have something travel 500 miles versus, 10 miles when you're thinking about climate impacts? I mean, it's complicated. So we try to make it simple, but it's not that simple. So again, why we're looking to you, New Hampshire, with your tiered approach to regional food buying, which I think at the end of the day makes more sense. And it's not just Texas, I guess, who's having border issues to your point, Stephanie.
Thank you. And I see here too, thank you. Edith has put in a helpful resource for educators. New Hampshire Farm to School has 2 Harvest of the Month curricula for New Hampshire schools and foods on its website. Thank you for sharing that. And I think for Representative Simpson, I just have one more legislative question for you is, so let's say that the bill passes all the steps and hurdles, then when would it go into effect? Next school year?
That's a great question, Nikki. I think Stacy has her hand up to respond. Is that right, Stacy? No, she has another question. Okay, so this is terrible. I have to find the bill because I don't want to say the wrong date. We had originally hoped that that it would go in effect in July for next school year, but we did hear testimony from the Department of Education Nutrition Services in the committee meeting that would be really hard for them to be up and running by then. So I think that there will need to be, likely there will need to be some kind of rulemaking anyway, and it would likely be later than that. So I'm not sure that it would come into play for next year, whether it could come online by January, maybe, or the next July. I'm not sure.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And I know Stephanie, I'm sorry, Stacy, you have your hand up if you'd like to ask you.
Oh, so besides Doris, there's a couple of other New Hampshire school food service directors on this call, and I'd love to hear from any of them about questions they have, concerns. How do you think it would best work for your schools? And I know some of the ones that are on are doing some local purchasing. So any information you want, how you feel about it, how it would work best for you. Tracy, Emily, Rhonda.
We just like jump on and start talking.
Go ahead, Emily.
Yes.
So I think something that would work best for me is like how Maine said, like how we have the harvest of the month too. And I think Maine was saying how they kind of worked with local farms of whatever that harvest of the month was, so that we would kind of have some help in who we would purchase from utilizing those harvest of the month produce or milk or whichever it was. I think that would be helpful to schools and food service directors. So it would be easy to get those foods on our menus. And then it would also help us with who we would purchase them from. I also think too, though, like there's a lot of schools in New Hampshire or food service departments in New Hampshire that don't know about this bill. And because it's supposed to be like, so beneficial for our budget and even just purchasing locally to the farms, that we should try to get some more communication out to the directors so that they're aware and kind of stand behind the bill and help in any way that they can.
That's great. Thank you. And I see we have a question also from a farmer that I wanted to pose from the chat. Donna asks, regional coordinators were mentioned to better facilitate purchases from farm vendors, and asks if someone could expand on this idea. As a farmer, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Nikki.
Yeah.
I just real quickly, I was going to mention, so New York, we have regional coordinators, and that's something that we've been working hard to get for the last couple of years. And what I think the difference in New York, I think it's just also size. We're so much bigger, and in terms of coordinating, our supply chains are very they're very complex in New York, and so trying to figure out where to source the foods, and connecting the farms to to the schools. That's and specifically because our program has so much paperwork involved, a lot of food service directors did not have the capacity to do that. So in New York, at least, that's what our regional coordinators do. Some of them actually do facilitate a lot of the education too, and they do a lot of the taste tests, et cetera, but it really depends on each region.
Thank you.
In New Hampshire, we don't have regional coordinators, and I don't necessarily see that as actually happening, but we do have a lot of partners that New Hampshire Farm to School works with around the state that would be helpful in helping to facilitate, school farmer connections. So that's, and also, developing technical assistance materials. It's something New Hampshire Farm to School is prepared to do. So it's not like the schools would just kind of have to figure this out on their own. That there are organizations and partners that want to help with this.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And I know that we are at 1 minute to 1 now. So thank you all for your questions. And I hope that we've answered everyone's questions. But if you did have more, you could send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat before we depart. But I really would like to thank everyone again, all our panelists, for sharing your knowledge and insights with us, your slides, all the background information is super helpful. And again, everyone here who stayed on with us for your engagement and your questions. Thank you. We already mentioned a number of ways that you can continue to help advocate for the bill. We have the toolkit, we have the sign-on letters. You can send a letter to your legislators and to the House Education Committee, and then to further committees as hopefully the bill continues on. And you can visit our website to learn more about the upcoming events we mentioned, find additional resources, and all of the other ways to help that I just described. And we're also going to send everyone who's registered a follow-up email so that you have all these ways to help in your inbox. So if you didn't catch it today, that's okay. And again, thank you so much for being with us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day and weekend. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much.